showtime.
It's time for that radio show everyone loves.
Do not attempt to change the station. Just listen, and we'll keep broadcasting.
It's time to begin the show.
103.9 LI News Radio presents Your Island, the very best in talk radio, with your host, Tom Schiliro.
And once again, welcome back as we're moving right along, right to the 3 o'clock hour, folks. And we've got a very, very important hour in our last hour of our show today. And as I was speaking about during the last segment, the importance of trying to do an analytical study of these individuals that are committing the most horrific acts in our country. We could look at Buffalo, we could look at Uvalde, certainly the incident in Indiana yesterday over at the mall, the Greenwood Park Mall. All of them fit a certain profile, but that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to look at in terms of specifically the shooter in Uvalde and try to see if there's a common thread. And I got some great guests that are going to be talking about that. People expert in their field. You all know Lisa Navarra, founder and owner of Child Behavior Consulting, has a lot to say about this, has done a lot of research. But more important, we also got Rick Shaw with us. He's founder and CEO of an organization called Awareity.com. And I had an earlier conversation with Rick, and there is a common ground. As you all know, I use the phrase, well, they're not connecting the dots, and we're looking at these horrific acts, and we're just not making what needs to be done in order to create a situation where we prevent these incidences. It's more than just a reaction. It's also a way to get involved so they don't happen and they don't have to react. But we're going to see where this conversation takes us. I'm hoping that we can get onto some common ground with this so that we can begin to make these incidences, if not eliminate them, make them rare so that we're not talking about them every 7 to 10 days. And it seems like that's where the situation is. So let me start with Lisa. We got Lisa in the studio. Lisa Navarra, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me today, Tom.
Yeah. Well, where do you think we are with this? And then we're going to bring Rick into the discussion. We are all looking at the videos and the body cams from the police officers and so on. But there is a study that needs to be done as far as the perpetrator. We could see him entering the school, and you could watch him walk and then make to the right. But then I look at him and say, well, where was he a year ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago? Elementary school. Where was he in a development that brought him to that day? And by the way, when you're looking at that video, that was the last day of his life. And yet he was willing to proceed with that as a way in which to a sort of behavior that was horrific. So, Lisa, how do we start this discussion when it comes to analyzing that individual?
It's really unbelievable how these teens are going back to their schools, a place that should be a safe haven, a place that they should have fond memories of learning, ups and downs, but not of such violence that they want to murder the individuals inside. I really believe that these cases and these individuals have such complexity to them. And just to take the surface of the weapons or, what it is that they did as the end result, to focus in only on that, I really think that we're making a disservice. We need to look much deeper. And I really believe that comes to the area of their behavioral history, their developmental history at home and in school early years.
And I think that's a good course of the study, the behavioral history. And the development history. I like that phraseology, because when we get to the point of a discussion on guns, and we've certainly done this on this program numerous times, it's almost too late. Because then the system has to work. Everything, the background check situation has to work. The police officers responding there to save lives. It's almost the cards are stacked against them. But let me bring Rick in. Rick Shaw, founder and CEO of Awareity.com, excuse me. And talking about this common behavior that may exist, but again, going to the Uvalde shooter. Rick, I guess I want to start with the phrase that I use all the time, is connecting the dots. It wasn't done at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School and throughout the other incidences there. Explain that, connecting the dots, and where we can go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it very much. Connecting the dots is something I've been looking into for a long time. And when I talk about the dots, I'm talking really about not only all those red flags, those behaviors that Lisa was talking about, the concerning behaviors, the suspicious activities, the social media postings. Those are all obviously kind of the information dots, if you will, but it's also connecting the dots with the sources of information, right? So some of those sources of that information could be friends and family, students, teachers, all kinds of other people as well in the community. And then there's also the social media sources. And then there's also the resources dots. The resources meaning who are the team members, if you will, within the school, within the community, who are able to intervene and sort of disrupt these pathways, if you will, to violence, like they call them. So when I talk about the dots, it's really a combination of people and information.
Reading a little bit about the background to Awarity, the company that you founded, and you essentially started, and it almost seems like that's like the focus point is the Columbine. What happened at Columbine back there in the late 90s? And there was something about that you recognized. See, we were all wrong on the responses to Columbine when we finally did the analysis of it, and then events after that took place. It took a learning process to finally give us some sort of a semblance of knowledge about this. But when we go back that far, what are we doing? What were we doing wrong then? But what are we still doing wrong today, Rick?
Yeah, good question. I mean, there's still, we're critiquing the response. We critiqued the Columbine response, and they made a lot of changes, a lot of improvements. So, I mean, we're definitely getting better, no doubt about it. But then we're looking at the Uvalde response, and there was certainly a lot to critique there as well. But I like to focus more on that prevention side. That was where I was really looking at. It's like, how do we prevent this? And so what were some of the prevention, disconnects, if you will? I like to call them gap silos and disconnects, but what were they? And let's not just look at the response and critique it. Let's look at the prevention, the proactive prevention side, and critique it a little bit. And that's really what I started doing with my research, because it really intrigued me as far as, I had a daughter I still have a daughter, but she was that age about that time that Columbine hit. She was like 8 or 9 or whatever. And it really got me thinking. It's like, we can't have these things happening in our schools, right? And so that's what really started me down that path of doing the research of figuring out how do we get ahead of the curve and prevent these things before they happen versus reacting to them when the shooter's at the door.
And I do want to underscore the fact that when I brought up the conversation about Columbine, I'm still thinking about prevention. I wanted to approach this hour on our show with that prevention. We spoke enough about guns. We spoke enough about the good guy versus the bad guy. We saw it had a better ending on Sunday because of that. But we've got to get to that point where that individual is not walking into the school with a gun. And that's the point that we have to get. And I think that's what brought me to where we are today with you. Again, Rick Shaw, Awarity.com, and also Lisa Navarra, Child Behavior. Lisa, going back to that, starting with that as our building block, the whole idea of where is the recognition factor to talk about what Rick is talking about in terms of that prevention, so that there is a recognizable factor so that we don't get to these incidences. Lisa?
It's such a great point, because if we really want to talk about prevention, it goes from development to home and school behaviors and social emotional learning. But listen to this. Even in these reports that are being generated after these terrible massacres, some of these reports, because of HIPAA, don't reveal the child's developmental history. And so how are we able to be proactive as much as we can on the broader scale if we can't even see where they were? So keeping that information quiet, and I understand the personal history of it, I get that. But when we're in a state of crisis and we need to really develop very sound, secure, and effective methods to address this, I believe revealing some of this information is very important. That's one. Additionally, we need to look back and we need to consider how these children are learning and behaving in school. So in this particular case, the information was there. And so I think it's so important for people to start thinking this way also and really factor in the child's development and what we can do to help them to make positive choices. And that means seeking the help or talking to their parents about what their struggles are so they can advocate for them at a young age. So in this particular case, preschool. It was reported that he was always ready to learn, pleasure to have in class. Okay, the early assessments started to see that he was becoming a gap behind academically. By third grade, now listen, sometimes children by second grade, if they have a disability, particularly ADHD, they are rejected by a close friend. We're talking 7, 8, 9 years old, right? So you're in third grade, 8, 9 years old, and he's identified as at risk due to consistently poor test results. At this time, from what I understand, he's going to school on a regular basis, which down the road changed. Now, where are these services? What's happening? What kind of support did he get? There's no mention of that. He received no related speech services, but he was reported as having a severe stuttering impediment, so much so that he was bullied by his peers. And you know what's sad, too, in his early years is that it was found that he was researching dyslexia. Why is a child who is not getting any services or support researching a disability that maybe he thinks he might have? He's reaching out to try and help himself. So here we have so much history right here. You know what this tells me? Bottom line is we need professional development for educators, both academically, in social emotional learning, and behaviorally to help these children who are struggling.
Yeah, Rick, I think Lisa brings out some great points. The question is, I'm reading some of what's on your website, and you say, we believe in making the world safer by questioning status quo thinking and giving good people the advantage over evildoers. But getting to the point of what Lisa was saying, those early years, how does one, I hate to keep using the phrase, though, Rick, but connect the dots between a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old future Uvalde killer, which is what he was, and brought him to that point on that fateful day just 2 months ago, and be able to prevent this, because that's what it's all about. He's the evildoer. For whatever reason, he's the evildoer. We are the good people, but how do the good people get to that point? This is a tough question, because if we have this answer, maybe we can stop this stuff. But to see what you say about that, Rick, I'm very much curious.
Yeah, and Lisa brought up some great things, and those are all, and there were others too. I mean, by the time he got to like the year 2018, so about 4 years ago, he had 100 absences.
That's right.
Again, and so there are like all these escalations. So as we look at this, so third grade at risk, fourth grade bullying, the absences, and then he was 17 years old but only completed the ninth grade. People teased him, students teased him about they called him school shooter. He told his girlfriend he wouldn't live past 18. So you start looking at all these things, but the problem is what we see over and over and over again, and what's missing is being able to bring that all together. Now, Lisa touched on it too with HIPAA and FERPA. There's a lot of misunderstandings about that. It doesn't say you can't share that information, but what it does say is you can only share it with the right people, and you have to share it in a secure way. And so what we've done basically is, I just call it the first preventers model. We have to have first preventers to help the first responders, right? Because we can't just keep responding. We've got to get some first preventers in there. And so the first preventers, if they have a platform who can bring all these dots together and see that bigger picture or puzzle pieces, however you want to look at them, it's not that hard. It's like what we're doing right now, except we can do it on the fly. Those first preventers can do this on the fly as soon as they know, okay, he's at risk. Okay, he's got bullying problems. Okay, people are calling him a school shooter. Okay, so then you have those team members, which could be social workers, could be counselors, could be SEL experts, could be whatever, but they're working together as a team to go out and pull together more information. Maybe even on social media, they go out and they start looking at what he's posting, because he posted a lot of things on social media that were certainly warning signs, going on out there too. And again, a lot of that stuff is public. It's just that people didn't go looking for it because they didn't use the behavioral stuff from the historical behavioral stuff to keep building on that and bring it together with more pieces or more dots to see that bigger picture. And that's really what's missing every time, is that the puzzle pieces were out there, but they were scattered. And organizations, especially schools, didn't have a compliant way. And I'm talking about the privacy with FERPA and HIPAA and things like that. But they didn't have a compliant way, a secure way, and a confidential way, and a way for needs-to-know access for all these team members. They don't have that tool, that platform to do that, to do those things. And so that's why these things fall through the cracks.
And you know what? I would like to expand on what Rick is saying in terms of there was so much posted on social media, right? And his peers knew, obviously his followers knew, his quote unquote friends on these pages knew what he was posting. There were even comments that were reported, and one said, looking like active school shooter. And when he was dressed up in his camouflage and he was holding a rifle. So, I think part of what we can do as that prevention piece is to make children and students more aware of how important it is for them to report when they see these types of posts and not be shy or quiet about what they see. They should be concerned. If they think that somebody is depressed or lonely, to speak up on their behalf and really showing them how that intervention could have stopped a massacre. I think that's another way to be proactive.
Yeah. Again,
Lisa, if I can add to that real quick, Lisa brings up a great point, because a lot of times students, and not just students, adults, they don't like to use a tip line because they don't want to snitch. Snitches get stitches. We've all heard that. So people don't maybe report it. But one thing we've found, and part of the First Preventers model is that we use a butterfly, and we call it the butterfly effect. One small thing can save a life, save a friend, whatever, and we're helping. And just that change that we've utilized in schools and communities has allowed more people to come forward with more information, because they don't mind helping at all. They don't like snitching. So those are like little things we've learned along the way through the research and then through validations also.
But, Rick, it seems like the red flag laws, which were created with the whole idea is to give that data that we need in order to prevent what took place in Uvalde and certainly the other cases and so on. Because I keep trying to isolate Uvalde, but I can't isolate Uvalde because I think there was errors made there right up to that point, particularly in the early years of this individual's life, that we can't come to a point where a coming together of all of the different agencies. But it certainly has to start with parents and family and friends. But then the schools have to get involved and the institutions got to get involved. And it just doesn't seem like that's happening. And the red flag laws are supposed to at least make that easier. But I don't see them as working. Rick, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, great question and great observation. The red flag laws, and then also even like threat assessment teams, because there's a lot of focus on putting those in place as well, right? Here's a couple of, I would just call them assumptions that have been made that are wrong, or at least misguided, we'll say. And that is that just because you create a red flag law, that does not solve all those gaps and disconnects we were just talking about, how the information is all scattered. So to actually enforce a red flag law, they need to have those other, probable cause types of information, and they're not getting that to the right people. So that's why the red flag laws fail still, is just because there's still that gap, silo, and disconnect problem between all this information being scattered and not getting to someone who could actually then go out and enforce a red flag law and maybe confiscate guns or whatever. So that's one thing. And then same thing with threat assessment teams. There's an assumption that if we just put in a threat assessment team, we can start solving this stuff. But the threat assessment team is not seeing this information. And real quick, I can tell you that the Secret Service did a study of 41 school shootings, and only 4 of those 41 did threat assessment teams get involved, again, because of the scattered dots. We're back to that whole scattered dots problem. And then in those 4, they still didn't prevent the school shooting because they didn't have enough information. So, again, there are some assumptions that if we create a law or if we create a team that we can get ahead of this, but it's still not addressing the problem of the scattered dots.
Yeah. I like the phraseology that we're putting out here right now. First preventer. You don't hear that so much. You hear the first responders. And I want to, when we get back from break, Rick, I'm hoping that we can keep you for the next segment. I want to explore the whole idea of the first preventer, the threat assessment team. How do we institute that so that, again, I keep in my mind picturing him walking into that school. It's as clear as day. You can see it on YouTube. You can see it anywhere. And you stare at him as he's walking down, making the right, going outside the classroom and beginning that evil as you speak about, and that where do we get to the point where that never ever happens, that individual doesn't exist in that way. But we're going to take a short break. Rick, I hope we have you back. Give us a call back for the next segment. I'm Tom Schiliro. I'm with Rick Shore, and I appreciate that. Rick Shore and Lisa Navarro. We'll be right back.
Island, live and local, with your host, Tom Schiliro, on 103.9 LI News Radio.
And once again, welcome back as we're heading up to that 3 o'clock hour, talking about an extremely important subject. And off radio, I was just talking to Lisa Navarro just a little bit about it. And it's not something that's explored that much. And I want to hear what Rick has to say about that. That we're always looking for ways in which to deal with the situation as opposed to the preventative side. And I think to start a dialogue like that, you don't hear too many of the media outlets even hitting on anything like this. And I'm happy to have the guests that I do. I have Rick Shaw, founder and CEO of Awarity.com, and also one of our regular contributors, Lisa Navarro, child behavior consulting, to try to talk about the preventive end of it. And Rick used a term that I like, and that's the preventative side of it. The preventative responders, so to speak, as opposed to the first responders. Rick, how do we define that? And how do we institute something like that it becomes almost recognizable that we are going to prevent this? We are going to make sure that we don't see those images of what is being treated to us right now in a very sad and horrific way. Is there a way to set something like this up, Rick Shaw?
Absolutely. And, kind of like on the first responder side of things, right? There's local police, there's sheriff, there's state police, federal police, DHS, FEMA, EMS, fire. I mean, they're all first responders, right? But they work together and they set up different command systems and things like that. On the first preventer side, we're talking about utilizing resources that are already there also. It could be social workers, it could be counselors, it could be people who know how to do some research or look up things like on social media. Those are all what I'll call team members that are part of the first preventers team. And the thing is that since those resources are there and since the indicators, as we discussed previously, are scattered out there, we just need a way to start bringing them together and then doing a little bit of additional research like we're doing after the fact. But we can do that before the fact just as easy. And so that first preventers group or team, if you will, it's not like we have to add a bunch of people or anything like that. We just need to connect them better and give them the tools to do what they need to do.
Is not used, that phrase, first. I love it. It's the first time I've heard of it. And again, we do a lot with this subject. We talk a lot about it. I bring a lot of experts onto this radio program to try to deal with it, but I've never heard the term first preventer. When we hear certainly first responders, we have the best in the world, particularly here on Long Island. Lisa, your thoughts about that? Now, you would be part of something like that, Lisa.
Absolutely. Being preventative, absolutely. And I would start with the early years. And to be honest with you, I think I already have a foot in the door with that. And that really comes to teaching the adults, meaning the parents and to educators, how to reach the children who struggle learning. Because imagine going to work every day and feeling like a failure. Well, that's how many of our children feel when they don't need to. So when we have the proper strategies, interventions, resources, then we can meet these children's needs academically and behaviorally before they become emotionally at a disadvantage. And then hope that they get the mental health services that they need. No hoping. Let's get it early. Or if there is a concern, a mental health concern, let us be able to identify that, have a system in schools that is well equipped with the psychologists and social workers that can help support these children. So that's already happening, but it needs to happen on a greater scope. And so what I think we're doing today, right now, is really deepening the waters of how important it is to meet children's needs early. And it's a big picture, it's complex, but I think that adds to being proactive.
Rick, I'm reading again some of what you're writing about exactly the topic that we're talking about. And of course, you say we believe that the world can be a safer place if we give good people the advantage. But this advantage requires questioning status quo thinking and looking at things differently on purpose. Are we? And I'm going to answer the question, are we not doing that now? And I don't believe we are doing that now. And your thoughts on, are we doing that now, which I don't think you think we are, but what can we do to make sure that we do? Because again, it's enough to keep having these discussions over and over again and still ended up with the same result with these extremely evil people that have all sorts of demons in their head committing horrific acts and causing an uproar in this country, particularly the social fabric of this country. Rick? Yeah, no. There's no doubt we need to do better. No doubt we need to do things, look at things differently, question the status quo. Like that, we kind of keep doing the same things over again, expecting different results. You know, the whole definition of insanity, if you will, from Einstein. But that's kind of where we're stuck. And I think that by bringing this idea of the first preventers, it helps people to go, oh, there's a new way, a different way, a better way, just a different path that we can go down because. And we've got to plug these in. And Lisa made a great point. I mean, she's definitely playing a part as a quote-unquote first preventer. But the key is we have to give Lisa, and I'll just use Lisa as an example here, in her school, she has to also know what the kids know, what the students know, what the teachers might know, and everything else. Because that can be part of what she's doing when she's working with these kids or with these parents or with these individuals. And so, again, it's just a matter of getting people to think a little differently about how we can bring this information together to get by some of the barriers of there's perceived barriers with the privacy and the FERPA and the HIPAA and things like that. But they're really not barriers as much as they're just guidelines. But we've got to make sure that people know how to utilize those guidelines. And so it's really kind of cool when you get people thinking about this and then you get people doing it. And we've got people doing this first preventer stuff in the real world. It really does work. And it's really fun to watch them. And I say fun, maybe that's not the right word, but we get to see them go, wow, this is great because we're able to step in and help this kid, help this parent, help this employee, and those kind of things. And it sort of builds momentum to where we can do more of this. That's
right. And I have to stop you right there because I understand what you meant by fun. You really meant the excitement, the enthusiasm, that you actually have something that works and you know that it works and you just need people to shift their mindset enough so that way they say, this is something here. Try this and let's see if it works. But I'm not going to just try it. I'm going to try it with integrity. I'm going to try it to the way that it's supposed to be and then really measure the data. And then something? It is exciting because it's exciting to know that you're making a difference, a good difference that you're going to influence others around you. So that's what we want out of this show today, right, Tom? We want to raise people's awareness and to the point where they're saying, hey, we need to talk about this more. And now we need to start taking different kinds of action too.
And so, but the whole idea is what the end result could be here. And again, I'm hearing some refreshing ideas that have to be implemented. Rick, we're going to let you go in just a few minutes because now you have a busy schedule. But is it going to require the cooperation of government, being on the state level, federal level, and so on, to move towards changes in laws, particularly the HIPAA laws and so on, so that personnel records or mental health records are made available, particularly when it comes to juveniles? Because it almost seems that that's what we are talking about, is those early years. Was the child bullied? Is that going to be kept secret? Is the right hand not going to know what the left hand is doing? And then that becomes a problem where we don't prevent these things from happening again in terms of that legislation and the cooperation of the governmental world. Rick?
Yeah, no, the good news is, no, we don't have to really have any of those regulations changed at all because, again, they don't prevent the sharing of information. It's just how you share it and who you share it with. And so we can take this from the community up now versus from the federal level down because, there's just so much stalemate going on with all the politics and everything. So, but that's, like I say, the good news is we don't need those changes. We're already doing this in other places. The idea is we've got to get the right tools in there so that we can do the secure part, do the confidential part, do the need to know part. And so when that's all handled, now instead of trying to do all this stuff manually, there's tools that can help make sure that these strategies get implemented. And then you start seeing the actions. You start seeing people going, oh, wow, I can go help this kid. And the reason I want to, kind of focus on that real quick too is that the number of at-risk individuals, and I use that term in a sort of a general way, but stressors, grievances, things like that. I mean, the number of kids that are, and not just kids either, adults, but it's soaring. The number of at-risk individuals out there are soaring just because of all these issues. So it's almost like we were falling behind before, And now it's getting even more difficult just because there's more kids that need help, need someone to come in and maybe help them with that intervention and things like that.
Rick, just one final question. Your mission statement for the organization Awarity is to prevent incidents. And again, I'm loving the word prevent and make the world safer. How were you received out in the community when you put forth your ideas in terms of particularly when incidences like this happen? Are people standing up and applauding and saying, well, yes, this is finally the right method? I know from the police end of it, we teach active shooter cases and so on, and we need to do that. But this to me is the flip side, and the flip side that has to be addressed. So I guess the question is, how were you received in the community?
Well, that's a great question. And actually, I've been evangelizing for a long time. But what I learned, and I had to, I've got a lot of lessons learned myself. But when I used to go in and talk about prevention, people used to get a little defensive sometimes. Like I was questioning that they were even doing any prevention. And so I had to learn the difference. And so now when I go in and talk to people, I talk about proactive prevention versus reactive prevention. Because the reactive prevention is what we're doing, where first responders are showing up right away, so we're preventing additional damage and additional losses and things like that. So it is prevention, but it's reactive prevention. And again, I'm not knocking it. We have to have it. But my point is that once I help people understand the proactive side, getting ahead, then I was received much better. The message was received much better. And then it was people were more open to like giving that some thought versus saying, I'm already doing prevention. What are you talking about?
Rick,
so that was a lesson learned for me.
Rick, before I let you go, Awarity is people listening right now, if they want to learn more about the organization, is there any Facebook pages, websites they can go to?
There's a Twitter page that, it's Awarity also. They can go to LinkedIn that's got an Awarity page. We do have a Facebook Awarity page. So yeah, there's multiple places they can go. I'm on Twitter as the Prevention Coach, just Prevention Coach. That's what I'm on Twitter. So there's lots of ways to go out there and learn, and please reach out. I'm really on a mission to help make sure that we can get this proactive prevention and these first preventers working together, because I know good things can happen.
I really appreciate you taking your time out from your busy schedule to be here today. Once again, Rick Shaw, thank you so much, and hopefully we could talk to you again soon on a more positive note as we start to move in the right direction with all of this. Thank you so much, Rick.
Absolutely. No, I'd love that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tom, very much. Thanks, Lisa. Great to talk to you again, and I'll talk to you guys later, okay?
Thank you, Rick.
Okay, thanks. Again, as what I had said earlier in the program, to try to at least bring that angle up of ways in which to prevent some of these incidences. We knew another one did happen on Sunday. We're just not talking about it too much because, according to the media, there's not enough people that were killed, and that's how bad it's gone. It doesn't get any worse than that. Let me put the number out there. We have a few minutes left. 631-451-1039. Any thoughts that you may have on this subject? Is there a way to take that end of it, the prevention end of it, and so on, and to bring it more into a successful conclusion so we don't have to watch those videos that we're seeing coming out of Uvalde. Once again, 631-451-1039. Lisa, back to you.
Yes. I'd like to share some statistics.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Go right ahead.
Yeah. So, according to the American Child of Psychiatry, there are nearly 80% of children and adolescents who did not receive mental health care. The children are ages 3 to 5 and 6 to 9% and 6 to 9% of children and adults 6 to 17 years old did not have these mental health services. And it's also estimated that 1 of every 5 children and adolescents in the United States has a mental disorder. Now, of course, there's different degrees of mental disorders. There's different types of conditions. However, there's, I believe, lack of understanding of what they are and what those signs are. So sometimes it's hard to identify them when we're working with them in the classroom. Or we say, that's interesting. Let me see how it goes. And maybe we don't speak with the school psychologist as quickly as we can. Or we don't describe it as quickly as we can or adequately. So maybe it just sounds like a little quirkiness or nothing to really be concerned about. Because essentially educators cannot diagnose clearly. We're not doctors. But we absolutely can speak up when we say we have a concern, and that could also be another step to be actively proactive.
And again, the whole idea of proactive is what I was hoping, to do a show like this, at least to put the thoughts out there. There are people out there that are thinking, well, there's a lot of kids that are in crisis. We hear a lot of situations and so on, but they don't become active shooters. And they're right.
Right.
They don't. But when you look at the one that did, there is that common ground that they did have that. But at least it points us in the right direction. And I think the level of frustration that I'm having by talking about this and how important it is that we realize that there is a problem, and yet other kids may have that problem but not do the same thing. But I think we can come up with something that does make a lot of sense. Go ahead, Lisa.
I just think that to do our due diligence, we need to make sure that there are no stones unturned. And again, it's very complex. There's always a long history of something. And you're right, Tom. Just because somebody has a condition doesn't mean they're going to go to these great lengths. As a matter of fact, they're probably living a very happy life, But if they're not, then why can't we make it that they're happy when they're young? And so that way, we are investigating all areas, providing positivity and just a healthy wellness to everybody. So they don't feel like this individual did, that he doesn't feel human. He said he didn't feel human, and he didn't feel empathy for others. That's a terrible feeling, and certainly that does not happen overnight.
Okay, 631-451-1039. We got Terry over there in Patchogue. Terry, what do you say?
Oh, boy, I have a lot to say, but I know you're short on time here. This is not a fairy tale world right now. How many millions of parents are single parents or drugged up parents or alcoholics or not intelligent enough or don't give a crap about these kids? How many millions? Okay? You see these thugs go out there. I mean, what kind of homes were they raised in to go in and beat up a guy at the bodega the other day? I mean, come on. Yeah. There's no easy answer. This Monday morning with the quarterbacking is making me sick right now.
Hi, Terry. Thank you for calling in. We appreciate it. I hear your frustration, and I really believe that you're not alone. As a matter of fact, you're right. You wonder, where are these kids coming from? Don't they have parents who love them? I think it's not just the family dynamics, but I also think that it's the social dynamics that are out there. I mean, for instance, with the Valdi case, he was on all these violent video games. And then he became violent while playing them and very aggressive. So I think there's so many factors that go in. I think it's so important that we just work together to try and...
Do they have parents at the house? Yeah. I know nothing about this guy. I mean, the Parkland shooter, I remember that they had the cops were there all the time at this house.
Yeah, and it was... Let me get to the last call. We only have a few minutes left. I want to get to our last call. Terry, thank you very much. I want to get to... Michael over there in Rocky Point, see what Michael has to say. Go ahead, Michael.
Hey, Tom, how are you? Tom, good. As I'm listening to all you people talk today, my mind goes back to the time when we started talking about this on your radio show. And even back then, I said, there's only one way to stop this right now, and that's putting armed security, trained personnel at these venues, whether it's a mall, whether it's a school, wherever, just like Israel did. They solved the problem. And then everything you guys were talking about today, that's all great. But if my house is threatened, the first thing I do is lock and load, close my doors, and make sure I have a perimeter.
But we're looking towards the other side. So you don't have to do that. I mean, what happened on Sunday was amazing. He saved lives, that young man, 20 years old. And we saw that. But how do we get to the point where that guy is not taking a knapsack into a bathroom and putting a gun together and walking out into a shopping mall in Indiana? That was today's discussion. And I think it would make that a lot easier for you and everybody else that carries a firearm. And at least so you don't have to be put in that position or in harm's way. That's, again, the frustration of everything that we are saying. And many of the gun owners would support something like that. But in any case, we're believing it. We're out of time. We're out of time.
I grew up with weapons.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, Mike. Lisa, I'm going to have you have this last word, 30 seconds, and put out where people can reach you and the organization and everything like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. childbehaviorconsulting.com. Follow me on Twitter, on Facebook, on TikTok. Lisa Navarra, EDU. I have a lot of videos, a lot of content. I'm here for you as a resource. Call me if you need help with your child, and if you want professional development for your teachers, educators of any kind, as well as related service providers. It's really important we work together on a proactive level so children learn the skills and how to learn, and the adults know how to manage the difficult behaviors as well.
Once again, Lisa Navarro, thank you so much. I'm Tom Schiliro. 3 o'clock hour is upon us. Everybody have a good day, safe day, happy day. See you all tomorrow.
Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today. I want to be a part of it. New York, New York. These vagabond shoes are longing to stray right through